In times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion. Thanks for listening to today's show. Today's topic is education. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Democrats and how they know if they can control the textbooks, they can control the states. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Today's topic is how Democrats know, they absolutely know that if you can control the textbooks, if you can control the schools, the colleges and the universities, your elementary schools, your junior highs and your high schools, if you can control the textbooks, the content, the education, if you can control education, you can control the state. You can control the community, the city, the village, the country. You can control the people when you control the ideas. Democrats understand this, and they've understood it for decades. And despots have understood this principle for centuries. That's today's topic. And I'm going to use Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and his recent announcement that he will withhold billions of dollars in state funding to any college or university that complies with the Trump administration's Compact for Excellence, for academic excellence. I'll talk to you about what that compact actually is, what the truth is behind it, what it's calling for in terms of academic review and the priorities for education, and why in the world, I'm going to ask the question, why in the world would anybody stand against this? And why would the governor of California threaten to withhold, in his words, billions of dollars in state funds to colleges and universities that comply? That's today's topic. Before we get into the show, remember that our sponsor for the rebellion is Equipping the Persecuted. That's equippingthepersecuted.org. Equipping the Persecuted is a ministry that serves our brothers and sisters in Christ in Nigeria who are suffering for their faith. They're being persecuted for being Christians. Many of them have been killed by the tens of thousands. The Fulani tribe, a Muslim tribe, is persecuting and martyring Christians across the entire nation. Some estimates are up to over 100,000 Christians have been killed simply for expressing their faith. Equipping the Persecuted goes into these communities and provides schools and orphanages, hospitals, hospital supplies, medical care to the Nigerians who are suffering for being Christians. They also go to these villages and to our brothers and sisters and provide security training. How do you secure your town, your community, and stop the persecution before it happens? Equipping the Persecuted is an organization that you definitely want to support. Go to equippingthepersecuted.org today and make a tax-deductible gift. Also, another bit of housekeeping before I proceed. Please subscribe to The Rebellion. Subscribe to The Rebellion and then consider giving us a 5-star approval, a 5-star review. By doing that, that increases the likelihood that other people will listen to The Rebellion, and it helps perpetuate this message. You don't have to pay any money. Just go and subscribe to The Rebellion on your particular YouTube channel, on this YouTube channel or whatever social media platform you use. Subscribe to The Rebellion, give us a 5-star review, and then consider posting your favorite episode of The Rebellion on your social media and encourage your friends and family to follow likewise. Please consider doing that. So today's topic, Democrats, they know that if they can control the textbooks, they can control the state. Let's set the context for this. Let's go back to George Orwell's dystopian classic, 1984. You've all heard of it. Many of you have read it. If you haven't read it, you've heard so many quotes that you probably understand the book very well. Basically, the premise is Big Brother takes control, and lies become truth, truth becomes lies, everything gets turned upside down, and you live within an environment, a dystopian environment of utter control by the state to the extent where they're controlling your thoughts. They're controlling what you can say and what you can think. You're being punished for thought. And many people have cited 1984 as almost prophetic to what we're having to deal with in our culture today. Government largesse, the state overreach. You're being told what you can say. And if you say something that's unpopular or something that is in simple disagreement with the LGBTQIA narrative, for example, or the DEI or the critical race theory narrative, then you're automatically branded as a hater and your disagreement is synonymous with hate, et cetera, et cetera. Men have become women and women have become men. And if you say otherwise, then you're a hater, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe. All of these things are very similar to what George Orwell talked about in 1984. And that's why people keep citing it over and over again as they critique contemporary culture. The word Orwellian has become quite pervasive in our daily dialogue. We say, well, that's an Orwellian way to view at things. And essentially it means you're looking at the situation through the lens of 1984 and you're saying, this makes no sense. You're buying a lie, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and you're turning the world upside down. And essentially, you're doing what the prophet Isaiah warned of in the Old Testament. You're calling good evil and evil good, bittersweet and sweet bitter. You're calling truth lies and lies truth. And God warns us through the words of the prophet that woe unto you when you do that. You're going to suffer greatly when you turn things upside down and start lying about the reality in which you live. So in this dystopian classic of 1984, Orwell commented, on the power of education. He understood this. So when Orwell talked about what could happen in a dystopian overthrow of culture, when the government takes charge of everything and Big Brother is constantly watching you, how do you control the populace when you want to do that if you're a despot? If you're a dictator, if you want to be Big Brother, if you want to be part of the government that controls every move, every action, and every thought of the citizenry, how do you do that? Well, Orwell understood the power of education in this process. And he actually said this: he who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. One more time. He who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. What did Orwell mean by that? Well, how do you control the past? Well, you control it through education, through the teaching of history, air quotes, history. You do something like the 1619 Project, where you redefine American history. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Doesn't matter whether all of the credible historians say, well, that's not true. That's not what really happened in 1619. And that's not really the foundation of the American Republic. It doesn't matter. If you're Hannah Nicole Jones, you write the book anyway, you turn the world upside down, you lie about it, and that lie becomes the narrative, and you control the past. And therefore, you can control the future because people start looking at the present and the future through the lens of the past, which is no longer real. Does that make sense? So Orwell understood that. If you can control your history classes, if you can control the curriculum of what's taught in your schools about the past, you can control the future. And he who controls the present controls the past. So it's all the twisting of reality by controlling the narrative, controlling the information, controlling education, controlling your schools. That's what George Orwell was warning of in 1984. Joseph Stalin added this very similar statement. Joseph Stalin, the nefarious dictator of the Soviet Union, responsible for, some would say, upwards to at least 50 million deaths under his regime. Some would estimate it to be upwards to 100 million. So under communism and Joseph Stalin, you have millions and millions of people that are suffering under the government's largesse and the government control. Joseph Stalin understood the power of education when he said this: education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed. Joseph Stalin, education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hands and at whom it's aimed. So you have Orwell saying, he who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. Stalin comes along and adds, education is a weapon, and it depends on who controls it, who holds the weapon, and at whom the weapon is aimed. Stalin understood this very well, that if you wanted to create and craft the Soviet society, communism, and control the lives of people to the point where you could kill tens of millions of them and still retain your power, that education was critical. It was a weapon in the process of doing that. Hitler understood this too. He chimed in, and this is a direct quote. All these quotes are legit. I've checked them out, okay? So these are not spurious quotes. These are real quotes attributed to these nefarious people, okay? Hitler chimed in and said this: the youth of today is ever the people of tomorrow. So he understood the value of controlling the youth because they're going to grow up, and in 5 years, 10 years hence, they're going to be the voting citizens of tomorrow. The youth of today is ever the people of tomorrow. And this new Reich, the Third Reich, will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give youth its own education and its own upbringing. So Hitler said the youth of today are the German citizens of tomorrow, the voters of tomorrow, the soldiers of tomorrow, the diplomats and the government officials of tomorrow, the teachers of tomorrow, the workers of tomorrow are the youth that you see today. And my Third Reich, he said, will give our youth to no one. We will take our youth and give our youth our own education and our own upbringing. So Hitler understood the power of education. Joseph Stalin understood the power of education. Over and over again, all the despots of history, from Robespierre to Mao Zedong, demonstrated that they understood the power of education and that to control a nation's people, hear me on this, to control a nation's people, you first need to control the nation's schools. They understood this, and it makes sense. Everybody should understand this. If you want to control people, control their ideas. And how do you control ideas? What people think, what people believe, what they value, what they hold dear, what they will fight for. Well, you start that process through education. If you didn't believe that, if somehow you want to challenge me and say, well, that's an exaggeration as to what education is for. Now, why do you educate your students in the first place, your children in the first place? Because you want them to understand certain things, to hold certain things as being good and other things as being bad. That's the whole point of social justice, isn't it? That some things are just and some things aren't. So when people on the left march for change, hope and change, when they march for justice, when they march for something or against something else, they're doing so because they hold certain values as being important and other values as being aberrant. Make sense? So you want to perpetuate the good through education, and you want to eschew the bad. You want to teach your students, your progeny, those that will follow you. You want to teach them the things that you think make your culture, your community, your town, even your schools, good places to live. That's the power of education. Whether you're on the left or the right, I would think that logically you'd have to agree with that. And my point so far in this podcast is this: dystopian classics like 1984, by George Orwell, obviously, I've already said that, or Huxley's Brave New World. These dystopian classics understood the power of education and the reality of despots in recent history, like Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Adolf Hitler, and even more ancient history. I don't know if it's ancient or not, but back to the French Revolution. And Maximilien Robespierre understood the power of education. If you want to control a nation's people, you have to control the nation's schools. It goes hand in glove. So if you ever thought that today's Democrats don't understand everything I've just said, and that the frontline battle for the future of America is in America's schools, you don't need to look any further than this past week's headlines for the proof that these Democrats, in fact, do. They understand this. And as I said in the intro to the show, in California, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom just announced that he will withhold billions of dollars in state funding for any California school, college, or university that complies with the Trump administration's Compact for Academic Excellence. Okay. So what is the Compact for Academic Excellence? I'll get to that in a minute. But let me quote the governor exactly, so I'm not accused of misrepresenting him. Here's what Governor Newsom actually said: I will not bankroll schools that sell out their students and surrender their academic freedom. This is what Gavin Newsom actually said as he publicly demanded that his state schools surrender their academic freedom to his Orwellian rule. So that's the interesting twist to almost all of these stories. The left will say, I won't stand for this, as they do the exact thing that they're condemning. Again, we've talked about psychological projection. I don't know if they're consciously aware of it or not. I don't know how they can't be. How can you have a brain and not be consciously aware that what you just said is exactly what you're condemning? He says, I will not bankroll schools that sell out their students and surrender their academic freedom. He just said that. But he's demanding that they surrender their academic freedom to his will, because he's saying, if you don't do what I say, I'm not going to give you money. So he's criticizing the Trump administration for compromising the academic freedom of schools through the Compact for Excellence. And I'll talk to you in a minute about what that actually says, what its actual wording is, what it actually calls for. But Gavin Newsom has automatically and immediately disqualified himself from any commentary on this any further, because he just hypocritically and in a self-refuting way said, I will not give you any money if you sell out your academic freedom to the Trump administration. I'm demanding that you compromise your academic freedom to me, the governor of California, in order to get the money. Again, it's Orwellian spin. It's upside down. It is self-refuting. He's sawing off the very branch upon which he sits to make his claim. All right. So what about the president's Compact for Excellence caused this apoplexy for this self-appointed god of the Golden State named Gavin Newsom? What did Donald Trump's reprehensible imperial edict actually say? Okay. In today's hyperbolic political atmosphere, you've got to go back and read the stuff for yourself and ask, what did it actually say? Because the exaggerations, the innuendo, the upside down lies in dealing with your political opponents today just distract from any resolution, any common cause that we can share in making schools good rather than bad, for example, or society more free and just rather than the opposite. I would argue even do so in your own political family. You can't take everything at face value anymore. People are exaggerating too much. Do it with me. If you don't believe me, then go check the receipts, read the real quotes. Go back and get the Compact for Excellence, for example, after you listen to this podcast. If you think, well, I'm not sure Piper's right on that, I think I am. I'm going to share with you exactly what it says, exactly what it calls for. I'm going to do it in a more abbreviated fashion because of the nature of this podcast, but I think I'm going to be very fair, very accurate, very honest in what I'm saying. And here's what it says. In a nutshell, it was on or about October 2nd. So it was last week, 2025. The Trump administration sent a letter to 9 of our nation's most selective universities. So not everybody got the letter yet. These 9 received it. And the 9 were, I'll give you the list: Vanderbilt, the University of Pennsylvania, Dartmouth, the University of Southern California, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, the University of Texas, the University of Arizona, Brown University, and the University of Virginia. Those were the schools that received this Compact for Excellence. It was a letter sent out by the Trump administration. Like I said, it is called the Compact for Excellence in Higher Education. I'll abbreviate it and say Compact for Academic Excellence. And it was really quite simple. Wasn't all that verbose or lengthy. Here's what it called for. First, President Trump called for schools to eschew all racism on their campuses and to comply with all non-discrimination laws by agreeing not to hire or fire faculty or staff or administration on the basis of color of skin, or to consider a student's race or ethnicity in its admissions decisions. Did you hear that? The first thing that the letter calls for is to not engage in any racism and to not hire or fire faculty on the basis of the color of their skin, or to consider a student's academic status, admission, not to make those decisions, base those decisions on race, color, or ethnicity. In other words, hire people and fire people on the basis of the content of their character, on the basis of merit, on the basis of their credentials, whether they can do the job or not, and don't violate federal law by discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, their race, their ethnicity, or the fact that they're male or female. Don't do that. Why? Because it's wrong. It's immoral. There was a time 5 minutes ago where we all agreed on that. We agreed with Martin Luther King Jr. that we should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, that you should get a job based on merit, not because you're white or black or anything else. And that's what the Compact for Academic Excellence calls for. It calls for the same in reviewing students for admission. You shouldn't be giving preferential treatment to anybody because they're a certain color. To do so is racist and it's against federal law. Second, excuse me, the Trump administration requested that all undergraduate applicants be evaluated based on merit and their corresponding performance on standardized tests such as SAT and ACT. So the Trump administration is saying when you review applicants for admission to your institution, Vanderbilt, University of Texas, University of Arizona, Brown University, University of Virginia, University of Pennsylvania, Dartmouth, Southern California University. When you review student applications, you are required to do so. We ask you to do so based on merit and academic performance on standardized tests like SAT and ACT. Again, why is this controversial? When I went to college, I had to take the ACT, SAT, and those scores were critical to my admission. Period. So stop ignoring these merit-based tests or massaging them and compromising them, and stop advantaging students because of the way they look, and simply admit your students based on the way they perform. Should not be a controversial thing. I don't know why anybody would be up in arms about that or threaten to withhold funding if you didn't do that. Third, in an effort to make education more affordable for American students from less financially privileged backgrounds, the compact, the letter from the Trump administration, called for a 5-year tuition freeze for all U.S. students. Now, a 5-year tuition freeze. I'll get into why that is very possible for the colleges and universities that received this letter. Now, some colleges and universities would find it difficult to do that, but they didn't receive this letter. For example, the university that I was president of, Oklahoma Wesleyan University, would find it very taxing to have a 5-year tuition freeze because we didn't have a huge endowment to allow us to subsidize the tuition of the students that were enrolling at our institution. So to freeze tuition would have really hurt our bottom line and our ability to balance our budget, stay in the black. But these institutions are different. We'll get into that in point number 4. But let me repeat point number 3. In an effort to make education more affordable for American students from less financially privileged backgrounds, the Trump administration called for a 5-year tuition freeze for all U.S. students. Tuition freeze for United States students, for Americans from less financially privileged backgrounds. Okay, how can they do that? Well, let's go to point number 4 in the Compact for Academic Excellence, the letter from the Trump administration. The president and his administration requested that universities with endowments of a minimum of $2 million per undergraduate, which, just for the sake of arguments, would generate about $50,000 per student per year at a modest 5% annual return. So if you've got $2 million per student in endowment, $2 million per student in endowment, let's just say you're investing it and you're getting 5% annually, just for the sake of argument. That would give you $50,000 a year in income that you could be spending on students. Now, Oklahoma Wesleyan University, many private liberal arts institutions are not charging $50,000 a year right now. They're less than that. So what this letter is saying is that these prestigious institutions, these selective institutions, have huge endowments in the billions of dollars. And if you've got at least $2 million per undergraduate, you should be able to take at least $50,000 a year off of the income of that corpus and give it to students. And the students shouldn't have to pay any tuition, quite frankly, because $50,000 per year per student would cover it. That's what the president is saying. Use your endowment to help these students. You've got it. You've got $2 million per student, so use it to help these students. Okay? And use it in a manner that does not employ DEI or CRT. Use it in a manner that is regardless of their race or sex. And focus on the hard sciences. Offer free tuition to all students majoring in the hard sciences, regardless of their race or sex. That's what he's saying. Okay, so let's just go back through the first four again, and then I'll go through the rest quickly. First, President Trump asks these schools to stop the racism and to comply with all federal non-discrimination laws. Do not hire or fire or admit based on the color of somebody's skin. To do so is a violation of federal law. It's a violation of morality and ethics. People should not be treated differently because of the way they look. That's what he's saying. Second, the administration requested that all undergraduate applicants be evaluated on the basis of merit, their SAT and their ACT scores. Third, in an effort to make education more affordable to American students from less financially privileged backgrounds, freeze tuition for 5 years for U.S. students only, not foreign students. Fourth, the president requested that universities with endowments of a minimum of $2 million per student, generating probably $50,000 a year at 5% annual return, that you consider giving free tuition to all students majoring in the hard sciences, regardless of race or sex. Now, he didn't even say all students. He said students majoring in the hard sciences. Okay? Fifth, in an effort to assure that American taxes are spent on American schools and serve American citizens, the compact, the letter from Trump, called for limiting international undergraduate enrollment to 15% of the total student body, with no more than 5% from any one country. So in other words, you're getting American tax dollars. You and I are paying for these schools. That's just a fact. Okay? We're paying for these schools. American taxpayers are paying American tax dollars to American schools. So isn't it logical that we should expect these schools to serve American citizens rather than otherwise? So he's saying you don't have to cut off all international enrollment, but let's limit it to the undergraduate, not the graduate. He's just zeroing in on the undergraduate. The undergraduate colleges should enroll no more than 15% of the total student body and no more than 5% from any one country. Okay? Sixth, to ensure academic freedom and avoid viewpoint discrimination, the compact asks schools to commit to institutional neutrality. That's a quote. By promoting a vibrant marketplace of ideas, another quote, on their campuses that does not stifle divergent viewpoints. It also required that teachers refrain from political bias in their official capacity. Controversial? Does this sound like fascism to you? I don't think so. Viewpoint neutrality, vibrant marketplace of ideas. Let's have a robust debate. And let's keep your politics out of your official teaching so that students can actually have these arguments without feeling fearful of being penalized on the grade because the professor doesn't like them or doesn't agree with their political bent. Seventh, the compact called for schools to create and enforce policies and prevent disruptions or protests that impede normal campus activities or encourage harassment of individuals based on ideology, religion, or personal or political views. Well, that seems to make sense. Do you want your campuses to be chaotic, where students can't even go to class, they can't walk across the campus green and feel safe in doing so? They're being constantly confronted, maybe because of a T-shirt they're wearing or a political hat that they have on. Students shouldn't feel like their safety or security or their very person is threatened simply because they're walking across campus and their wardrobe is not acceptable to other students. That's what the president has called for. Create policies and environments that prevent disruptions or protests that impede normal campus activities or encourage harassment of individuals based on ideology, religion, or personal or political views. If you're Jewish, you should really appreciate that, because you know that on almost every one of these campuses that received this Compact for Excellence, there have been protests against Jewish students. And if there's anything that allows the protesters to identify the students as being Jewish, then they are subject to a lot of persecution and a lot of intimidation, to the point where their safety is compromised, and they feel they're in fear for their security, for their very person. Number 8. The Trump administration specified that schools must not discriminate against women and that they must adhere to Title IX. This, by definition, means that men are not permitted in female spaces such as bathrooms or locker rooms, nor are they, men, allowed to participate in women's sports. That's what Title IX demands. That's what it calls for. Why would anybody suggest otherwise? But we live in a world where good is evil and evil is good, right is wrong and wrong is right, up is down and down is up, and men are women and women are men. And Title IX is a joke. It's irrelevant if women aren't real. And the Trump administration is acknowledging that and saying that schools should not discriminate against women. This misogyny must stop. And you have to adhere to Title IX as it's written and as it was intended. And that, by definition, that means that men cannot enter into female spaces like bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, and men should not be able to steal a woman's scholarship or sport by pretending to be a woman. Finally, the Trump administration called for monitoring compliance with all of the above, as a pretext for receiving money from the American taxpayers. So in other words, monitor all this stuff, demonstrate to us that you're not discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, that you're providing a safe environment, safe defined as people shouldn't feel in fear of their physical safety simply because they're Jewish or because they're Christian or because they have an American flag on a t-shirt. They should be able to walk across campus without feeling threatened. Okay? That is not a compromise of academic freedom. In fact, that is the securing of your safety to come and go across campus as you see fit, to get into your class, to sit down, to raise your hand and ask a question without the professor intimidating you because he doesn't like the ball cap that you're wearing. Okay? The Trump administration is also saying that these institutions should monitor federal policy as it relates to Title IX, and that women should not be losing their very identity at the hands of the misogynists who want to steal that identity and blackface them by dressing up and pretending to be something that they're not. So there you have it. That's it. That's what the Compact for Excellence calls for, and that's what it says. Donald Trump just told these universities that if they want your tax dollars and mine, they're required to respect academic freedom, stop discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, and prohibit men from disrespecting women, and that they should focus American dollars on American citizens. That's what they said. I'm going to repeat it. That's all the Compact says. Okay? It doesn't say any more. It doesn't say any less. The Compact says that if these universities want your tax dollars and mine, that they are required to respect academic freedom, stop discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, that they are to prohibit men from disrespecting women, and that they should focus American dollars on American citizens. And what happens? Gavin Newsom immediately resorts to parroting the lies of Oceana. Okay? And if this doesn't prove that Democrats understand full well the dictatorial axiom, if this doesn't prove that Democrats understand full well the dictatorial axiom that if you can control the textbooks, you can control the state, I don't know what does. They know what they're doing. and you shouldn't pretend otherwise. Gavin Newsom and everybody in the Democrat Party are up in arms right now with regard to the attempts of the Trump administration to bring the educational industry back to sanity, to have it teach your kids how to read, how to write, how to count, and that America is exceptional rather than evil. Just those things. The basic biology of male and female, just those things. They are up in arms about the Trump administration wanting to teach those things, to teach people not to judge people by the color of their skin, to award positions on the basis of merit and not on the basis of political bias. They're up in arms over this because they know the power of education. They understand that if they lose control of education, they will lose control of the state. And if you don't see that in Gavin Newsom's hyperbolic, upside down, Orwellian parroting of the lies of George Orwell's 1984 Oceana, I don't know what else I can say to convince you. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion.